I'm Senator James Learight. I chair Business, Commerce, and Tourism for the Senate, and I recently was appointed by the President Pro Tem to chair a Select Energy Committee to investigate the February 2021 storms. As we all know, the February winter storm was widespread throughout the continental U.S. It brought sub-zero temperatures to Oklahoma for days on end. Our utility systems are not built for that type of weather. The cost of electricity generation went through the roof. Natural gas spiked incredibly high. Oklahoma has approximately $4.5 billion plus in energy generation costs from the storm. As fuel to generate is passed through to ratepayers have the obligation for that expense. Doing nothing will financially devastating effects for Oklahoma families, businesses, and our overall economy. If we do nothing, this cost for families, seniors, and fixed income, single working families could be strapped with bills they struggle to pay, leading them to choose between paying for necessities or paying the electric and gas bill. Businesses still reeling from the effects of the pandemic could be forced to make cutbacks, layoffs to pay off these high utility bills. Both of these scenarios will have rippling effects throughout our economy. If you remember, several weeks ago, the governor, the president pro tem, the speaker, and the AG announced that they expected high utility bills would be investigated and solutions would be forthcoming. Since that time, several members from the executive branch, the legislative branch, including myself, have been meeting to find a solution to a very complex and difficult situation. The solution is securitization of the debt incurred by ratepayers during the winter storm and will require legislation to set up that framework. This legislation will help manage the short-term financial effects for Oklahoma families and small businesses. The legislation lowers the total monthly cost for most ratepayers and lengthens the amount of time to pay off that utility cost. Other states have pursued this option to pay for unplanned significant recovery costs in the wake of large-scale natural disasters. What we need to remember is Oklahomans will see higher bills. We use record levels of energy and fuel prices soar to record levels. The bill is coming due, and we're taking the steps to ease the burden of paying it back. Securitization makes the most sense to help us deal with this problem. Now, I want to be very clear, no long-term harm to the state budget, no increase to state debt. State does not pay anything. We're only setting up the framework. Plenty of safeguards and restrictions were built into the legislation. The state does not assume any debt or liability. Utilities not allowed to profit, paid what they are owed and no more. After weeks of work, it's the best option for ratepayers, it's the best option for our economy, and it's the best option for Oklahoma. With that, now I want to introduce my counterpart on this committee, Representative Gary Mize, and I'd like to publicly thank him for working countless hours with me to come up with a solution along with the rest of the committee. With that, Representative Mize.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I too want to reiterate some of the comments made by my counterpart in the Senate. I appreciate your work on this as well. My name is Gary Mize. I'm the state representative for House District 31 and chairman of the House Utilities Committee. A few items that we want to discuss are, first, this is not long-term indebtedness to the state. This is not going to be on the state's balance sheet. One of the other things that we also wanted to do and address in this legislation is that we did not want to grow government in our efforts to solve for this problem. Both of these points are addressed in the language of these bills. What I mean by not growing government, we were able to identify an existing authority in the Oklahoma Development Finance Authority to ensure supervision and oversight of the issuance of these bonds. That's what I mean specifically when I talk about not growing government. Secondly, we also wanted to address some of the safeguards and restrictions that were written into the bill. Examples are timely audits of costs associated with this storm, extensive required vetting and analysis by the Oklahoma Corporation Commission as it pertains to the regulated entities and costs associated with. Also, a requirement of specific dates for the emergency in question so that exact prices can be calculated. Again, that is all language that is in the bills. Finally, point that we wanted to make sure and be very clear are these costs were incurred. So they were going to and are going to be paid for regardless. What we are simply doing by passing these two bills and opening up these buckets is allowing for those costs to be spread out over a longer period of time to make it easier to pay for the ratepayer and the customer. With that, I'd like to introduce Brandy Reith to talk about billing. Brandy's the Director of Public Utilities.
Thank you, Representative Mize. The Corporation Commission appreciates being able to be a part of this process to look for solutions related to the storm. I've prepared some information today. We thought it was important that people understand the order of magnitude that this storm has brought about for ratepayers and why this step is critical and necessary. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, we have a pre-storm cost example that's showing here. And this is showing that an average customer on a gas system in the state of Oklahoma was roughly paying about $100 a month on their gas bill before the storm. And if you notice on the bottom right-hand corner, the average cost, the total cost of gas delivered to those customers was about $3.37 per unit. And if we go to the next slide, this will show us if we were to take the storm and put it through traditional regulatory treatment in what's known as a fuel adjustment clause, or what normally would happen at the commission, the first customer bill that they would have received after the storm with these new costs would have been roughly $1,967 for 1 month of usage. So well over a total year's billing. And that would take it to an average of about $92 per unit delivered. Keeping in mind that this would not be a once and done scenario. They would not receive one large bill and it would be over. They would see those impacts for up to 7 months after through increased cost of gas, with those average bills being around $1,200 a month for the next 7 months in this gas scenario. So if we go into the next slide, we have what we're actually proposing through the legislation, or what the legislation is proposing through cost mitigation, through securitization, would take that average bill impact down to $158. So as was mentioned, it is still higher than the original $100 bill. These charges are not going to go away, but this is a way through extraordinary relief to bring that per customer impact down significantly and hopefully to a more manageable level, and brings that average gas cost in this example to about $5.92. Keep in mind the additional thing that this does that is so important that this legislation be a tool for the commission to consider is it removes the long-term profit from the scenario while keeping utilities whole in the short run. Once it moves into securitization, that will not have profit built into it. And over the life of a 10-year example, in this one utility alone, that would save around $400 million in ratepayer billing. So that's why this tool is so important to have as an option for the commission to consider as it's determining how these costs will be handled going forward. If we move to the next slide, this is just to give an order of magnitude. While the commission does not regulate municipal systems, we thought it was important that the public have an order of magnitude of how they were impacted. Collectively, the municipals that have reported so far usually spend about $1.1 million during the February billing period. During the storm period, they were used and billed $24 million during that same period. So for an average customer on those systems, that would equate to about $80 on a normal month. And during the storm period, a little over $2,500 during the storm period. So as you can see, these impacts are devastating to individual customers without extraordinary relief. And the commission stands ready to have this tool available for consideration. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Jared Haynes with the Office of the Attorney General.
Thank you, Director Reith. I am Jared Haynes, the Chief Assistant Attorney General for the Utility Regulation Unit at the Attorney General's Office. On behalf of the Attorney General, we would like to thank the other people standing with me today. They have come together from the Senate, the House, the Governor's Office, and from the Corporation Commission to look at how we can mitigate the impact on Oklahoma customers. We appreciate their efforts and their work, and we truly believe that having this tool available will be to the benefit of Oklahoma customers. As Director Reith laid out, there are significant savings on the interest costs of these bills that have to be paid back, and they can be paid back over a longer period of time, turning off the horrible impact in the short run that customers and households in Oklahoma could face. We also believe that this tool is consistent with our efforts to investigate market manipulation and price gouging in the natural gas market in Oklahoma. We believe that the bill would allow any restitution or relief for customers that we obtain to go back to customers and offset the bond payments that securitization would entail. We are excited to work with the Corporation Commission and other stakeholders to continue to evaluate this tool. We hope that the bill is passed here in the legislature to enable the Corporation Commission's review, and I'll turn it over to Secretary Wagner from the Governor's Office. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ken Wagner, and I'm the Secretary of Energy and Environment. I think one of the things that we need to point out is the two bills. One will solely be focused on the regulatory side that is traditionally and normally handled by the Public Utility Division at the Corporation Commission. The second bill is broader. If you recall, 6 weeks ago when we first came before you and started talking about the storms, that there was this whole class of non-regulated municipal gas systems and others who would be affected by non-regulated gas costs that couldn't be afforded the same safeguards that you have at the Corporation Commission. So we have focused, and this group was very broad, we have focused that on helping those smaller municipal systems. It would also include those wholesale providers who provide power to the municipalities, like the Grand River Dam Authority or the Oklahoma Municipal Power Authority. Also, our great electric co-ops would be qualified to use this tool if they so choose. It would also include municipal gas systems. To be broader, we also made it inclusive of rural hospitals who may have incurred unprecedented costs at a rate that would seriously put in jeopardy their operations, as well as school districts. And so this program is not mandatory on the non-regulated side. I would call it an opt-in program. And so we're hopeful that when we all got together and we realized that, again, these costs have been incurred, we've so-called already incurred the debt, it's how do we pay for it, we wanted to provide another opportunity for those municipalities or electric co-ops or others who may want to take advantage of that to do so. So it's not without work, and it's not without figuring out that system, how it works for that particular municipality or hospital or school district or whatever the case may be. But it is a pathway to save them potentially millions of dollars. The governor certainly supports and thankful for being this opportunity being brought to us. We're thankful to the Senate and the House for their work. We know that they've got their work ahead of them to get this passed through their members. I'd like to particularly thank the Senate staff and Jared and his staff at the Attorney General's and certainly General Hunter and Assistant Attorney Tim Downing for their work. It really was meeting almost every day for 6 weeks to analyze, number one, collect data on non-regulated systems. You'd be surprised how hard it is to find out what those bills actually were. And even today, they're still coming in, and we don't have the full breadth of it. Certainly, the Attorney General and Jared were instrumental in that, as was the Senate and House in taking care of that. And of course, the Corporation Commission. They requested of the governor that we help find another tool that would save potentially between $500 million and $1 billion to consumers on just cost of carry for this indebtedness, and doing it in a way that I think benefits the consumer. It is helpful to the credit of the utilities, and it also doesn't directly obligate the authority of the state or the appropriations of the state. And so we think that this is the best possible in a bad situation, the best possible outcome in a bad situation. So we're hopeful that this will all come clear as you get to read the legislation and talk to others. But with that, I would like to turn it over to Mike Fina of the Oklahoma Municipal League.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to thank all the legislative leadership, the governor's office. We have some municipalities in the state that are in desperate need. I receive multiple inquiries weekly about this topic. And we're not talking about our large cities. We're talking about our small municipalities that cannot afford these bills. They need a lifeline. And the state is providing that because we're in desperate need. We're to a point where some of these bills are exceeding these small communities' annual budget. So we're desperate. We need help. We think this is a great solution. So I just want to thank everybody that's worked on this for our municipalities. Thank you.
With that, we'll be open for some questions if we have any questions. No, we do not. I can tell you they're going to be JCABs.
Can you explain in basic terms what exactly this does?
With the securitization, what the securitization will do is allow for, say on the regulated side, a utility will be able to take that money, say it's $1 billion, use round numbers, that $1 billion will be securitized by the payment from the ratepayers. It makes it very valuable so that they can go out and sell it as a bond, and it gets a very good rating, a low interest rate.
This is a dumb question, but so the utility companies are then purchasing the bonds. It's not the state that's purchasing the bonds.
No, it will be set up through the Oklahoma Development Financial Authority, and they will be purchasing the bonds. The CorpCom will be the one that's actually auditing the cost to make sure that all that cost is acceptable to be used just for the February 2021 energy spike.
Tell me how much the bonds will be for?
We will not know. It is an opt-in, so we'll see when they come and submit for this what the amounts. I can tell you that the amounts that we're seeing out there are in excess of $4.5 billion.
That's total for unregulated.
And regulated.
Regulated who need this relief.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, Senator, you had me, I was right with you until you said that the ODFA would be purchasing the bonds. They're creating the bonds, is that right?
They'll be the ones that will hold this. Of course, the Treasurer's Office and the bond authority there will be organizing this and purchasing those bonds.
But just, Secretary Wagner, you seem to be,
No, I would say Jared would be
I'm just trying to figure out who is issuing the bonds.
Absolutely.
Because my
Let's let
understanding.
Jared-
Yeah, Jared, great.
So in traditional regulated utility securitization, what happens is the utility has a certain amount of money that it needs to recover from customers. Another entity, such as a special purpose entity, like a separate LLC set up by the utility, or a government entity, in this case the ODFA, issues bonds that are owed to external investors. They use the proceeds of the bonds to pay off the utility's obligation, and then the utility collects charges from customers that repay the bond going forward through a special tariff or a document authorizing charges that is different from the utility's normal rates and is legally sacrosanct from bankruptcy or other measures that would impact the utility.
Thank you very much. And so I'm just trying to make sure, because I'm sure we're all trying to make sure we get this right. So the ODFA would issue the bonds. Private individuals and mutual funds and whatever would invest and purchase those bonds from ODFA. ODFA would then get paid back the debt that it carries by the ongoing monthly payments by the utility companies. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
How long would people expect to see these special tariffs on the utility bills?
It would depend on the Corporation Commission's review under the legislation that's under consideration. Depending on the bill impact, the Corporation Commission could authorize 5 years or 10 years or some other amount that they believe protects customers and spreads out the costs over time. The best that I could indicate would be what Director Reith shared as one example, where the increase in that example, I believe, was $50 over 10 years. But that would depend upon further review by the commission and its overall decision.
Senator or Representative, either of you gentlemen, do you have an idea when we'll have language in bills?
I foresee the bills being filed either later today, tomorrow. That's still up to the purview of the speaker and the pro tem, but that's my anticipation.
It'd be fair to sum this up without getting into the bond securitization, but the goal essentially here, and tell me if this is right or wrong, is to give the utilities a longer period of time to recoup this cost so that it's less money that people are paying.
It actually gives the ratepayer a longer
Or the
term
ratepayer, okay.
to pay off this, so they're not hit with the significant costs that you saw in the examples. No, it is totally limited just to this winter storm.
You gave the example of $100 for the bill, then going up to $150. Is it a 50% increase for people in general, or is it? Because that number, I mean, if your bill is $2,000, then that's a $1,000 increase.
So in that example, keeping in mind that was for a February bill, which is the heaviest use gas month typically. So there might be a month where you would see that type of increase, but in other months, what you'd really be looking at is that difference between what the normal gas was and what it kind of goes to as a line item. So for a shoulder month, for example, it might be $5 or $6 more a month. It will just depend on how much you use. So we're not looking at a 50% increase in bills. I want to make that very clear. But we wanted to give you an illustrative example of a heavy month to kind of show what the worst case scenario was. And our worst case scenario would be $158 versus the $2,000.
But industrial companies that use more gas essentially pay more than $50 to go to like the average.
That was just for a residential example. So your commercial customers are going to be hit incrementally with that difference. Keeping in mind, though, with the term industrials, it's important that we keep, a lot of times, they have taken by choice an unregulated tariff, so that people who are on an unregulated self-choice tariff where they purchase their own gas are not covered by this program.
Has the Attorney General's office identified any fraud or price gouging thus far?
Thank you. Under the Oklahoma Consumer Protection Act, our investigations are confidential, so I can't share anything about the progress of our investigation at this time.
You guys mentioned that you guys have been talking every day for 6 weeks. Have you guys been in public meetings about this?
We've been working through with a working group to come up with a solution with the parties that were involved, and now we're coming forward publicly.
Real quick, I'm sorry, Aaron.
I did want to point out one thing, too, that and I'm sorry, I meant to mention it before. The governor has reached out to the president. We've sought federal aid. We know that our counterparts down in Texas, our neighbors to the south, are doing the same. The way this legislation is written, should we get some federal relief later down the road, that this would make that relief would actually inure to the benefit of the consumers who would be subject to that tariff. So if it's after the bond is issued, that money would go to help retire that tariff over time. And so, and I think the same is true for any money that comes in the form of a clawback from the efforts of the Attorney General and his group as well.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm sorry, Aaron, I just have one more question for Senator Representative. Sure, sounds good. I owe you a sandwich. You said rural hospitals are included in the unregulated entity situation. Is there a designation about in the county they're living in? Because I think I have heard that urban hospital systems have had $1 million, $11 million bills themselves, and so I imagine some hospital executives are going to want to know where's the cutoff.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. And it depends on how they purchase gas. A little bit more clarification. Brandy, I'll let you answer that one.
So the way it's set up right now, this is looking at those nonprofit hospitals, first of all, I think is one important designation to make, and looking if they're on those customer choice tariffs where they had complete market exposure. So the actual definition, as I've seen it in the proposed legislation, is for nonprofit hospitals more than it's about the actual county or where the actual hospital is located. It's the type of service they take.